Hey y'all, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about rounding numbers. And before we even get into all of the different ways that we round, first let's talk about why we would round numbers. Mathematicians are actually really lazy. Even though it looks like we like to do a lot of work, mathematicians are really lazy. So a lot of the times we round numbers in order to save us some work. If when you're rounding numbers, it's not saving you any work, don't round the numbers. Rounding the numbers is only there in order to be lazy. So I encourage you, if you're trying to be lazy, to round the numbers, but if it's not making it any easier, don't bother rounding, just use the real numbers. Here's how rounding works. It's kind of like trying to figure out which part it's closer to. So if I want to round a number to a certain place value, the first thing that I'll do is I'll put an underline or a box, some way to mark that this is the place I'm trying to round to. Then I'm going to look next door. And I like to draw an arrow looking next door. I'm looking to the right, always to the right. For most of you, that will be the hand that you write in. For some of you, you're left-handed, and you'll just have to remember it's the opposite direction. It's to the right, a smaller number. Then, if that next door number is 0 to 4, we're going to let that underlined number stay the same, or your boxed number stay the same. If it's 5 to 9, we're going to make that underlined number, that boxed number, get 1 larger. An easy way of remembering this is saying if it's 5 or more, we're going to raise the score. If it's 4 or less, we're going to let it rest, meaning let it stay the same. After that, after we've changed our number or decided it should stay the same, everything to the right of wherever we put the box or the underline is going to get turned into zeros. So let's look at an example. If I wanted to round this number, 31,698, if I wanted to round this to the nearest hundreds place, the first thing I would do is I would put a box or put a mark around the hundreds place. This 6 is the hundreds place. Then I'm going to look next door, so I'm going to look to the right. That 9 tells us what to do. Should I leave it the same, or should I raise the score? Well, the 9 is between 5 and 9, so the number is going to get bigger. This number in the box is going to change to 1 number higher. Then I have to follow this last step. It says all of the stuff to the left stays. So this 31,000 is going to stay the same. I just brought down those same numbers. Everything to the right is going to get turned into zeros. So this 9 turns into a 0, and the 8 turns into a 0. So if I rounded that one to the nearest hundreds place, this is what it would look like. Let's try another one. So what if I wanted to round this one to the 10,000s place? That's a really big number. The 10,000s place. What would I do? Well, I'm going to look all the way out here to the 10,000s place, this 3. Then I'm going to look next door. Next door is the 1. 4 or less tells us to let it rest. So the thing in the box is going to stay the same. There's nothing to the left of it, so nothing to the left of it has to stay. But everything to the right is going to get turned into zeros. So this 1 is going to turn into a 0. This 6 is going to turn into a 0. This 9 is going to turn into a 0, and this 8 is going to turn into a 0. So if I rounded 31,698 to the nearest 10,000th, I end up with 30,000. Okay, I'll give you one, and I want you to try to round it. I'll give you one, and I want you to try to round it. Now, I want you to round this to the nearest thousands place. To the nearest thousands place. So write this number down, then follow your steps. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to put a box around whichever number you think is in the thousands place. Next, I want you to look next door. So look to the right of wherever you placed your box and see what number you see. What number is your arrow pointing at? Is that number 0 to 4? Or is that number 5 to 9? If it's 0 to 4, you're going to keep the number in the box the same. If it's 5 to 9, you're going to make it 1 larger. Then everything to the left will stay the same. Everything to the right will get turned into zeros. See if you figured it out. I'll give you a second to do it. Okay, so I asked you to round this to the thousands place. This 1 is in the thousands place, so I put a box around it. Then I look next door. Next door I see a 6. The 6 is between 5 and 9. That means 5 or more, I'm going to raise the score. The number in the box is going to get 1 bigger. So this 1 is going to turn into a 2. Everything to the left of it is going to stay the same. Everything to the left of the box is just this 3, so it stays the same. Then everything to the right is going to get turned into zeros. So this 6 turns into a 0, this 9 turns into a 0, this 8 turns into a 0. 32,000. Did you get it correct? Let's try one more thing, because sometimes they try to trick us. If I ask you to round this to the nearest tens place, you might get confused, because when you look at the tens place, you see a 9, you put a box around it. You look next door, you see the 8. The 8 tells you to raise the score, but I can't write a 10 in that place. So what I do is I have to carry the numbers. I put a 0, and I carry the 1 up top, just like adding would normally happen. 1 plus 6 gives us 7. Then I follow all the same rules. Everything to the left stays the same, 3, 1, and everything to the right gets turned into a 0. All we did was, if we have a 9, we have to bump it up to a 10. All right, let's try a couple more examples. So, if I look at this one, 63.574, I'm going to round this to a bunch of different places and we're going to see how it changes. First, we're going to say, let's try rounding this to the tens place. Go ahead and write this number down and see if you can put a box around where you think the tens place is. The tens place is right here. This is the tens place. Then I'm going to look next door. I'm going to look at its neighbor. Its neighbor is 4 or less. It's smaller than 4, which means that this number is going to stay the same. The 6 is going to stay the same. Everything else gets turned into zeros. So this 3 will turn into a 0. Then I've got my decimal. Then the 5 and the 7 and the 4 all turn into zeros. So I can write this as 60.000. Or if I'm super lazy, which is how I usually am, I can just leave this as 60. I don't have to show all those extra zeros after the decimal. Let's look at rounding it to the tenths place. If I round this one to the tenths place, now I can say, okay, the tenths, if I look at this one, the tenths place is this 5. See if you can round it. This tenths place is the 5, so I look next door, I see this 7. The 7 tells us to raise the score. 5 or more tells us to raise the score. The 7 is more than 5, so I should raise the score. The thing in the box will get 1 bigger, so this will turn into a 6. Everything to the left stays the same. My decimal, my 3, my 6. Then everything to the right is going to turn into zeros. So this is what happens if I round it to the nearest tenths place. Let's try now rounding it to the nearest hundreds place. So if I want to round it to the nearest hundredths place, I'm going to find the hundredths. The 7 is the hundredths. Go ahead and see if you can round it. Okay, so when I round it to the nearest hundredths place, I look next door. That 4 tells me it's 4 or less, so I'm going to let it rest. This 7 is going to stay the same. So is everything to the left of it. The 5, and the decimal, and the 6, and the 3. And everything to the right of it is going to get turned into zeros. So, there I've got this number here. And again, since these zeros are after the decimal, if I wanted to make it a little bit simpler, I could leave them off. After the decimal, we can hide those zeros. Before the decimal, we have to keep them. But after the decimal, we can hide those zeros. Let's look at our last one on this side. It says, what if I wanted to round this to the nearest ones place? Well, first I have to put a box around the ones place. The ones place is this 3. Then I look next door. 4 or less, I would let it rest. 5 or more, I would raise the score. Because it's 5 or more, I'm going to raise the score. The thing in the box will get 1 bigger. It turns into a 4. Everything to the left stays the same, and everything to the right turns into zeros. 0, 0, 0. So again, if I wanted to hide those zeros, I could hide those zeros by calling this 64. All right, that's how we rounded. Now what I want you to do is I want you to try for yourself to round all these. Pause the video, and once you've completed every single one of these, come on back. Pause the video now, and once you've completed every single one of these, come on back. Okay, so now you've had a chance to pause and try every single one of these. Let's test it out. Let's see if you got it correct. If I want to round this to the tens place, the tens place is right here. I look next door, that 5 tells us to round up. So this is going to be 30, and everything else turns into zeros. If I look at my next one, rounding it to the tenths place, the tenths place is this 4 right here. If I look next door, the 2 tells us to stay the same. So this is 25.4, and then everything else turns into zeros. If I want to round it to the hundredths place, I say, okay, the hundredths. The 2 is in the hundredths place, so I'm going to put a box around the 2. I look next door, the 8 tells us to raise the score, so the 2 is going to change into a 3. Everything to the left stays the same, so 25.43, and everything to the right turns into a 0. Then if I wanted to round it to the ones place, again, I find the ones place. The ones place on here is this 5, so I'm going to put a box around the 5. I'm going to look next door and I'll see this 4. The 4 tells us to stay the same, so I've got 25 decimal, and then everything to the right of it changes into zeros. 0, 0, 0. Or I could leave that just as 25. How'd you do? Did you get all 4 of them? All right, I hope to see you again soon. Bye.